Thank you, everybody, for being here, and welcome to the CBI webinar, How to Get Your First Job in Radio. I'm John Morris, president of CBI. Before I introduce our presenters, a couple of things I want to talk about. Be sure to mark your calendar for the CBI National Student Electronic Media Convention, October 27th through the 30th in sunny Orlando, Florida. We plan on having our full in-person convention return in the fall, and I'll tell you what, we've got a great setup in Orlando. You're going to love it. So again, October 27th through the 30th. And then for our advisors you soon will be receiving an email ballot for our upcoming board election. There'll be 3 positions that we have candidates running. Please be sure to get that done soon after it arrives. You'll have about a 2-week window. Now, let's help you find your first job in radio. Joining us today, John Shomby, talent and industry consultant, Backstage Country, United Stations Radio Network, and Dave Paulus, senior consultant, Virginia Association of Broadcasters. Thank you for joining us, gentlemen. I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you, John. That was great intro. It's great to be with everybody today on Zoom. That's something we haven't done very much in the last 10 months, right? I'm going to give you all a quick background on who I am and one of the reasons why I was asked to do this. I'm going to try to keep it to 2 to 3 minutes or less because nothing's more boring than listening to somebody ramble on about where they've been. But it'll give you some perspective that I've seen a lot of what you've seen as well. I started in college radio. I went to a radio class and decided it was very interesting. I actually chased a very good-looking blonde into the class, and her football player boyfriend followed her in. I realized that was out of luck, but I loved radio. And a year later, I was running the college radio station and enjoying it and having quite good success selling advertising for the college station. And I was approached actually by the commercial radio station in town, and they said they'd like to hire me to be a full-time account executive for them. And I said, hey guys, this will come as a shock to you, but I'm a junior in college. And they said, hey, we've seen good things from you. We'll arrange our sales schedule to match up with your classes. So for my junior and senior year of college, I took classes in the morning and I sold commercial radio in the afternoon. And senior year, I was fairly successful at it. So I decided that was a career I wanted to take. One of my favorite college stories, and I'll make this super fast, everybody's got those classes at the end of their degree that are the big class they've got to get to before they graduate. And I was selling commercial radio time, and I just finished selling a $36,000 commercial radio package to the Kentucky Fried Chicken franchisees in Northern Michigan. And $36,000 in 1983 was a lot of dough in those days. And I decided my marketing policy professor, who I think was 75 years old at the time, had challenged us as our final assignment to do a full advertising presentation. So me being a fairly lazy college student said, well, I'm just going to give him the presentation that I just sold these Kentucky Fried Chicken guys. And I gave it to him and I turned it in, and a week later he gave it back to me and he gave me a C- and said underneath, would never work in the real world. And I went, okay there, Captain. So I'm a huge fan of balancing great scholastics and great in the field business as well. So I continued in commercial advertising as account executive and as a sales manager. And in 1995, I was asked to be a general manager for the first time in career in Ann Arbor, Michigan, go blue, for a small market outside of Detroit. I did that for 3 years. Then the great folks at Saga Communications gave me an opportunity at 36 years old to be a general manager for WNOR and WAFX in Virginia Beach, Virginia, some heritage radio stations that John can attest to here. And I was fortunate enough that they did that, and I was able to do that for 10 years. Went back to Michigan, not too far from where John is in Indiana, to work for the largest company in broadcasting, iHeartMedia, for 2.5 years. I would tell you that was not the most spectacular experience of my professional career, but I learned a lot working from a big company, and I took a lot of those things that I saw back with me. The folks down here in Virginia, Max Media, reached out to me in late 2010 and said, would you be interested in coming back to Virginia Beach to be our general manager? And I did that for 7 years, and that's where my path crossed with the legendary John Shomby, which was a great experience. In late 2017, or early 2017, for the first time in my career, they told me they didn't want me anymore. It was quite heartbreaking. My first termination of my entire career. But I learned to get through that. I worked for an ad agency for a year and a half. So I was on the other side of the media business, which was great. And now I'm a consultant and I work directly with the Virginia Association of Broadcasters. So I spend the majority of the day talking to broadcasters all over the state of Virginia, along with the NAB as well, to find out where their challenges are and how I can help generate revenue for them. So that's hopefully a relatively brief synopsis of my background. Mr. Shomby, you want to take it over from there?
Yes, we are. I graduated from Penn State, just so you know. And I was at Penn State, literally flunking out during a time when you couldn't flunk out or else you'd get drafted. So that ages me. But I will tell you that I had a friend in my fraternity who was in the communications major at Penn State, and he started showing me exactly what they were doing, and it was really interested me. I always wanted to be a sports announcer. I grew up doing announcements in my bedroom, and you'll notice, and you probably have done that yourselves if you're that into radio. But it all started there, and as I was graduating from Penn State, I went home to my hometown of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which is a suburb, Norristown, Pennsylvania, and there's a radio station that's 2 miles from my parents' house. I saw that literally you could see the tower from their kitchen window. I decided to walk into that radio station between finals and graduation, and they just happened to fire somebody that morning when I walked in. And I was the warm body that they needed. So I got hired right after that and started there. And I will tell you, I am a classic case of moving up in the business. From there, I had spent some time at a major top 40 radio station watching disc jockeys work, WFIL in Philadelphia, in my spare time. And I got very interested in the top 40 format, and that's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to do sports anymore. And so that was my goal, is to head in that direction. And I wound up in the Southeast in a town that I thought was a suburb of Atlanta, Vidalia, Georgia. It is not a suburb of Atlanta. It's 3 hours south of Atlanta and 1.5 hours west of Savannah. And it's in the middle of nowhere. And it's the onion capital of the world. But spent 3 years there, and we made ourselves a name in the industry back then by breaking hit songs and creating creative promotions and getting a lot of publicity. And all of us wound up moving on to bigger and better things, me included. I wound up in Birmingham, Alabama, to help launch a top 40 FM radio station there, where those days FM was not as strong as it was now, obviously. And we launched the radio station in a matter of 2 rating periods. We went to #1. From that time period, I got hired by the competition to launch a radio station in Portland, Oregon, of all places. Wound up there for 3 years with a top 40 station there. And that worked out for a while, and then it didn't. The company decided to change formats, and that's what happens. And I was not working for a short period of time, but wound up in New Orleans at a premier radio station called B97, which is a top 40 station that programmed that station. For a year, I was there. And then I was contacted by somebody in Dallas, Texas, who was going to start a radio station with a company called Bonneville International. And they wanted me to launch that radio station and their AM radio station. One was going to be an oldies station, one was going to be top 40, and launched it there. I wound up spending 7 years in Dallas. 3 of those years, the station was top 40. We flipped it to classic rock in the mid 80s, and it's still a classic rock station down there. From there, I wound up in Boston, Massachusetts as a classic rock program director for several years. Came back to Dallas because somebody wanted me to program talk radio. Had never done that before. They wanted a music person doing that. And I programmed KLIF radio in Dallas for 7 years. Then I wound up hearing about this position called operations manager, where a program director who was in a multi-format experience could become a program manager over several stations. This was after stations became clusters, which Dave will get to in a little bit. And that I wound up back in Augusta, Georgia, of all places, and then Flint, Michigan, and Kalamazoo, Michigan. And then from there, I got the phone call. I was working for a company, Cumulus Media, wound up getting a call from an independent company that was called Barnstable Broadcasting at the time, wanting me to come to Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Virginia Beach, to program a country station and be the operations manager of that cluster of stations. And I was in Flint, Michigan. Flint, Michigan, Virginia Beach. Tough decision, but we went. I was there for 13 years. We wound up having a premier country radio station. Dave showed up in 2010. We did a lot of great things together there. In 2016, I walked into Dave's office and said, "Well, I got an offer to go to Nashville," and he still hasn't believed in me. And the Nashville offer was to come here for Cumulus Media, who I'd known people from, and run 5 syndicated country radio stations, country shows that were on radio stations around the country, and then wind up programming one of the radio stations here in the market, WKDF, which was then Nash FM 103.3. I was there until back last April, and as the pandemic continued on, they started eliminating positions, and mine was eliminated. But I decided that from that standpoint, it was time for me to branch out. So I wound up getting into a consultancy, opening up my own consultancy. And part of it is teaching young artists who are getting ready to go out on radio tours in the country music format. I teach them about radio. I also mentor several talk show hosts, DJs, etc. And I've mentored some program directors. And then I work with this show called Backstage Country, which is syndicated by United Stations, and they basically, it's hosted by a major country artist every week, and my job is to book the country artist, book the studio, and coach the artist. Someone else writes the script. So that's what I've been doing. Been here in Nashville. It'll be 5 years next month. So that's my history.
Awesome. John, I'm not sure those old pictures of ours were a great idea. You can tell I still have my hair, unlike some people on this call that will remain nameless, but it's just changed color a little bit. Hopefully that'll be about all we'll talk about, guys, about ourselves today. The rest of the presentation will be talking about you guys and how we can help you and give you any knowledge that we can about our history in radio as you guys begin the process of looking for your first job. I'm going to talk for a minute about companies and styles pretty briefly, but I think it's really important to realize, and I mentioned it in my brief outline of there's big companies and small companies out there, and you guys have probably in the process, if you've done any internships or part-times or in the process of applying right now, you've probably seen both. And I would say both have their advantages and their disadvantages. Small companies in smaller markets in particular are usually more dedicated to the individual cluster that they're leading and managing. So I think you have an opportunity to learn quicker in those situations. Big companies like the iHearts and the Intercoms and the Cumuluses that John had experience with and I did with iHeart, you're a little bit more like a number, I think it's fair to say, but you have bigger assets to choose from. So, one of the things I took out of my iHeart experience in Michigan, although I don't know if I would do it again necessarily, is I learned a ton about digital dynamics, all sorts of revenue generation arms that I didn't know. I was in Michigan, I was a director of sales for 45 sellers, 5 managers in 2 markets, but I really didn't have much social and digital background. So bigger companies have that availability to do that. Smaller companies, you get a little bit more eyeballs onto the microphone to get that chance. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of clarity. Both have advantages and disadvantages. And John, you want to talk a little bit about where technologically things have gone over the last few years?
Oh my goodness, we have gone from cartridges and tapes, manual traffic systems to CDs CDs and cartridges to all computerized. Right now, everything is computerized, from music to the point where you can actually do a show somewhere you could do a show in Nashville that will be broadcast in Evansville, Indiana, for that matter. And that's something that couldn't happen 10, 15, 20 years ago. So the technological advances for broadcasting have been amazing. That's basically, in a nutshell, what's happened with it. And as far as even getting a client on and getting a commercial done and all of that, a lot of this has been done, all computerized. And with the pandemic, things have changed even more because we've learned how to do it remotely, and we've learned how to do it with good technology remotely. We've learned different types of, obviously Zoom is one, but we've learned there's a program called Clean Feed, which a lot of people use to broadcast. That's one of the things we'd never heard of prior to the pandemic. But those are the things that have advanced now, and having that knowledge will be very important. Dave?
Yeah, I concur. Let's talk for a couple of minutes about people in your lives as you go through your professional career, mentors. And I know John and I, but I can point to my own situation. I've I've interacted with, I suppose, hundreds of people throughout my radio career. But there's really only 3 or 4 or 5 that kind of stick out for me as mentors. And I would encourage all of you, as you look through your career and begin to establish it, how important finding somebody that you can grasp onto, whether it's John or I after this presentation or other people that you've interacted with, that can help direct you in certain arms. It's hard getting started in this business. And John and I kind of fell into it as we started, but that was many moons ago. So mentors have been incredibly important to me. The gentleman that gave me my first leadership and management opportunity up in Michigan to be a sales manager in my mid-20s, and then an opportunity to be a general manager in my mid-30s. So those are really important, and I can't underestimate the importance of what they will help you develop. You won't feel as lost, especially with technology being so quick now, a quick Zoom call, a text, a phone call. Mentors give you the opportunity all the time to be able to reach out to people and help direct you. John, anything to add on that?
Just one quick example. When I was in Vidalia, Georgia, a 30-minute limo ride changed my entire career. There's a gentleman who's very popular in radio. Matter of fact, he's a #1 morning personality in New York these days. His name is Scott Shannon. And at the time, he ran a record label at the time, and they came down to play tennis against me and my program director. And when we finished the tennis match, we were driving back to the radio station. I basically looked at him and I said, "How do I get out of here?" And he looked at me, he goes, "Here's what you need to do." He went down a list of things for me to set a plan up and do exactly what I need to do in programming to make myself valuable for larger markets, to move up, to move into better positions, et cetera. 30 minutes, and that's it. But that was he mentored me throughout the years. I would occasionally lean on him for something, just one little thing, and he'd come back with an answer for me. But that's my main example. And of course, I'm looking at the other one. All the leadership I learned came from Dave. I had very, very few leadership skills until he arrived at 2010, and that was a tremendous boost for me for my career.
Oh, that's very nice, John. I told you no drinking at lunchtime, but I appreciate you saying that regardless. Thanks. That's nice. Let's buzz on to something that really changed the radio landscape. And as I'm doing the math in my head, for all of you guys, none of you were born if you're under 25 years old when the Telecommunications Act of 1996 passed. But that changed the dynamics of radio more than any single element that's occurred. That changed 2 things significantly. One, it allowed companies to own more than one radio or television station in the marketplace, which was a significant change. At that time, most companies, if not all companies, they owned one radio station, one FM and one AM, and that was it. And it allowed stations to get bigger fast. And it was a feeding frenzy. It really was, because a lot of the mom and pop companies wanted to kind of cash out and get done. And there were plenty of companies that were out there. Some were reckless, I think, in the way they did it, and just bought radio stations and television stations like crazy throughout the time. And they ended up getting 5, 6, 7, 8 radio stations in a marketplace, which was certainly very unusual. So the Telecommunication Act of 1996 changed radio dramatically throughout the years, and it has never changed. So now that is really what John had mentioned a couple minutes ago, develop clusters where you would have 3 or 4 or 5 FMs under one roof and a couple of AMs. So that's just a little bit of history, so you know what did that. They did it so they could economically compete, but it changed the radio landscape, and you could find an announcer that could do an afternoon drive show on a classic rock station and do a midday show on an adult contemporary station in the same building, and people saw some cost efficiencies to do that. So that was a big deal. And then John, talk a little bit about technology and format evolution, if you'd like.
Well, technology, I really addressed earlier. I just wanted to just use technology as this picture we have up on the screen here. That's what a studio looked like way back. And those little things to the left in those little slots are cartridges. That's what you played. And then those turntables where you played music. That's what I looked like. That's what it looked like when I started. So you can imagine how much it's moved since then, and what it looks like now. You can actually do something from your home, everything from your home, which you couldn't do then. Format evolution has been another situation too. And when I first started in radio, there were maybe 5 formats. There was top 40, there was easy listening, there was album-oriented rock, they called it AOR, soul music, and there was all news, or there was news and information. Since then, top 40 has proliferated into hot AC, rhythmic CHR, contemporary Christian music, EDM. Easy listening has moved into AC, soft rock, AOR into mainstream rock, classic hits, alternative, what they call AAA. Soul is now urban AC, hip hop, dance, gospel, news and information. You have all news, mainstream talk, business talk, sports talk. We've just proliferated so much, and that's changed the landscape and obviously opened up a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, no question about it. Let's talk, John, a little bit about digital platforms and how that's changed choice for consumers. And then I'll talk a little bit about the pandemic and centralization as well.
Well, first of all, one of the things you've got the DSPs, the rise of DSPs has been real important over the past, 10 years. And most of you, I'm sure, have experienced them. One of the things I've noticed just over the past 6 months is the evolution of Apple Music and Apple Music Radio. Now Apple Music Country has become a big item here in this town. And things have changed a little bit as far as the choices now, as far as radio is concerned. And we just had a seminar, a country radio seminar this past week, and it showed that listeners are making their move in that direction, although they still depend on radio for the most part for music. They're getting music discovery a lot from the DSP. So that's what's different. That's what's changing now as we go into this current state of radio.
Yeah, I would concur with that. I'll talk for a minute about centralization, which, boy, it's such a dilemma, guys. It is. It's radio to continue to stay significant and relevant in customers' lives needs to have that local connection, that local feel to itself. And centralization has really taken over a lot of radio stations throughout the last 5 or 10 years in particular, basically because technology is so efficient right now. And I'm certainly sure all you guys have heard about that, the availability to have one general manager, one sales manager, limited announcers in a building for a money-saving dynamic. It's a real dichotomy for broadcasters because the life support that radio needs over the next 5 or 10 years comes, as John mentioned, if you want to hear Luke Bryan, or if you want to hear a pop song or a rock song, you got a million places to find it. You need that local attachment and local feel that broadcasters can provide. On the other hand, radio, just like television, is under tremendous competitive elements, so they need to save money and be as efficient as they can. So centralization has been coming more significantly, and it will continue.
Oh, did we lose you?
Yeah, it looks like Dave froze.
Oh boy. All right. Well, I can continue from there till he gets back. What he's basically that's been one of the most important changes over the past 5 to 10 years. Even my position was affected by centralization back in April because they decided they wound up eliminating my position and another position here in Nashville, and they replaced it with one position for both. And again, it was part of that centralization that comes in. So that's something that you really have to look at. And I'll get to this before when Dave joins back in. But from the pandemic side of things, the other thing that they've learned here is to do more with less. And that's an example of what's happened with me. The technological challenges that we had, that we changed, we learned how to remotely broadcast. We've learned how to stay more relevant. This is one of the things that has been very difficult over the past 8-9 months. When you're doing something, first of all, you changed your entire way of broadcasting. You're walking into a studio in a building that was already set up for you. Now, all of a sudden, you're in a closet in your house with an engineer that walked in and gave you this little box or a control board. You're set up with a system called a Comrex or a Clean Feed or something like that, and you have headphones on, and you're figuring this out as it goes. You have your own laptop computer that's working through this, et cetera, and it becomes what we've learned to do. Several radio station companies are still doing that and plan to still do it, probably through, I would say, the next 6 months or so. We get Dave back yet or no? I can't hear you. So, all
No,
right.
not that I see.
I'll keep on rolling then until he shows up. I can imagine this is the other thing, the technological challenges you're seeing and hearing. This is what happens. We have, and I've done this as I've worked with labels, with country artists moving out into radio. They've tried to find different, more creative ways technologically to get the artist out there, because Zoom is not exactly the greatest. Sometimes it can be a little shaky, or the quality of the sound. So that's kind of from the pandemic. As far as the next 5 to 10 years, and I hope David can get in here to talk about this, where we see it going. I mean, streaming is becoming the norm. There is no question. My opinion, physical transmitters may not be essential in the next 10 years because of that. Because now everything, when you have the connected car, which 10 years ago wasn't as big of a deal as it is now, you have, people listening. I know as we did this little research with Country Radio Seminar last week, we learned that people coming in, taking their phone, going in, getting in their car, they stuck with what they had rather than turn on a car radio. They stuck with Apple CarPlay or whatever it may be, and if they listen to radio, they listen to it online. So streaming has become a bigger issue, and radio stations are paying more attention to streaming. And
Dave,
that's another, yes.
Yeah, Dave is back with us.
All right.
I am. Yeah, talk about the shakiness of Zoom. My power went out of my house just all of a sudden. I apologize for that. I guess we're back in business, so apologies. John, I think you're our take in preparations. I'll give you a break and talk about preparations. And let's talk about finding every industry dynamic you can read and engage with throughout radio, television, marketing, consumer habits, before I was so rudely cut off by my power in my house, we were talking about trying to meet the customer and the consumer where they are. For many years, radio was the only choice inside of a car, so there really wasn't much option. I mean, you were force-fed a 6 or 8 minute commercial set because there weren't any choices. Well, that's changed. And as we get through this and we talk about job outlooks, the abilities that recent college graduates and college students have to help 30 and 40 and 50-year-old broadcasters decide how to network, how to do social, how to do digital is going to be incredibly valuable as you go through that. So make sure you read Radio Inc., Inside Radio, all those dynamics daily. And as you start to apply for jobs, you'll be able to take bits and pieces out of there to be able to be more relevant as you're putting your cover letters and your information in the hiring staff's hands, if that makes sense.
I would also take a look at various seminars. I know it's money out of your wallet, but this country radio seminar we just had was not just country radio, but it's they addressed a lot of different things like the roles of DSPs and anxiety in the music business and things like that. There is an event in Minneapolis called the Conclave that happens every year that is very much geared to the young broadcaster. You have Morning Show Boot Camp, which is done for morning shows, excuse me, in Atlanta. The NAB, National Association of Broadcasters, they have a programming convention, which is this year going to be at the same time as their normal convention in Las Vegas in early October. That plus, I'm going to tell you right now, the fact that you know social media probably better than any of us here. Use it. Use LinkedIn. Use other socials to connect with people, to network.
Yeah, and I'll just add real quickly under job outlooks. Look, like every industry right now, radio is challenged. The job outlooks for a college student coming into the business right now are strong because of what we've been talking about, your ability to handle social media, digital media, video, blogging, podcasting, all the things that are out there that others don't. The challenge that you're going to have to be faced with, there's a lot of unemployed radio people out there right now. So the competition is strong to get your first or second job outside. So you'll need to be able to really separate yourself well for that.
Well, I'd see as far as, and I will tell you this, that one of the things you have in your favor, and we'll get to this a little more, is the fact that you come in a little cheaper than those people who have been there for 20 years and with a lot more digital experience. And that's something you need to play on. You need to use that to your advantage.
Yeah, I certainly agree. Communication, as you begin to apply for jobs and start to talk to people throughout the industry, I don't really think you can over communicate. I think you can get in a position where you're a little obnoxious or maybe too much, but there's very unique ways to get your name across. And we'll talk a little bit about that as you create your unique selling proposition for yourselves. But as you find mentors, as we spoke about a lot, find those people that can help you. Maybe they're in your university, maybe they're in your city. I would not at all be afraid to reach out to any of the broadcasters that you engage with or listen to and say, hey, I'm graduating with this degree. Radio is my passion. This is what I want to do. Do you have any advice for me? I think there's one thing I've learned being a leader and a manager for 25 or 30 years is that people love to talk about themselves. Mm-hmm. They just flat out do. So if you could stroke an ego a little bit and get somebody to engage with you about what they've done and how they've gotten through it, I think that can be very effective for you as well. John, you want to talk a little bit about industry publications and assistance because you've got a great knowledge on that.
The ones I basically you mentioned, but I also would let you know that go to the big company websites because like iHeart, Cumulus Media, Entercom, places like that have a place where there are openings. You'll see long lists of openings in these with these broadcasters. Summit is another one. Town Square is another one. They all have a main company page where you can go find openings and you can apply for openings there. That's one. Another is look at some of the industry trades. There's an industry trade called All Access, which covers every format from country to top 40 to CHR to rock, whatever it may be, and they have openings listed. You also can get to see what's going on in the industry and all that, but I would use that primarily when you're looking for jobs.
Yep. All right. I'm going to depress you a little bit, but I hopefully will try to bring you back after I depress you. The resume and cover letter. I estimate I have seen between 30 and 50 resumes and cover letters in my career for 30 years. So I guess that's probably a ballpark of 1,000 in that ballpark. And there's a lot out there. And I would tell you this, you have to stand out because for most cases, 15 to 30 seconds is about what I gave a resume and a cover letter. Because in most situations, I was briefing through a stack of 20 or 30 or 40 because it was for an opening I had, whether it's a font type, a color, an opening statement, something that's shorter, maybe bigger, bolder type with more space in between what you're doing. You got to stand out and you got to do your homework. And we'll talk a little bit about more of that toward the end, but make sure you know who you're talking to, how you're talking to them, and you got to make that 15 to 30 seconds stand out. So somebody puts that in the 3 piles, right? You know, you kind of got A, B, and C piles that if you've got a bunch and you want to at least make that B or A pile, and you've got to do that by standing out significantly as you go through that. And I'm sure John and I would be happy to help you throughout that process, figure out how to do that. But if you're doing it to whom it may concern, I'm interested in the job I saw, blah, 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 you're going to get in the C pile as fast as you can turn because there's others that have done it differently. And John's got a really good example of one up on the screen right now.
Yes, this is somebody who worked for me who I mean, basically she decided to compare herself to a song, and she lined it up that way with how many things, you see the numbers she put in, and then she worked with the radio station she worked at, et cetera. And then there are examples that she uses of what she's done online, interviews she's done, et cetera, which I think is good attention getter. Also notice, I don't really have any, I don't really care that you worked at Piggly Wiggly or anything like that. You need to have that out of there. Just give me your relevant qualifications more than anything else. And something that, again, draws me to you. That's the thing. This is what drew me to her. I was curious. I wanted to see more. I had a board operator position one time open in Dallas, and I got a 2x4 sent to me by a kid who wanted to apply. And I looked, excuse me, his whole resume is on the 2x4. And he said, I'm the guy that could run your board because I've got one of my own. And that was, I thought, very creative and at least drew me to him. It kept me on that pile. The other thing is make sure you know who you're applying to. I don't know how many times, excuse me, I have been, just when I first got to Virginia Beach, there had been somebody who was there before me. For 2 and 3 years, I would get his mail sent to him, job applications sent to him rather than me. Just make a phone call, pick up the phone, make a call, and ask who the person is. Who's the program director? Who's the marketing director? Whoever it is you're applying to, so you have that name. Get the name of the spelling right, all of that. It personalizes it. And again, if I see to whom it may concern with Dave, it goes in another pile.
Yeah, and I'll dovetail onto that, John, real quick. There's no excuse anymore for not being able to get information about who you're reaching out to. Between LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and there's just a million ways to do that. Find something that you can pull off somebody's social media that just begins the process. I happen to be a big Bruce Springsteen fan, which means a lot to John and probably not the rest of you guys, but I had somebody reach out and say, hey, I saw a lot of stuff about the boss on your Facebook page. What was your favorite show that you went to see? And it caught my attention. Do something that feels personalized and engaged to the person you're reaching out to.
Cover letter, one of the things I would recommend about the cover letter is don't give me your resume in the cover letter. I want to know just quickly your quick why. Why are you applying for the job? I mean, the guy on the right basically was recommended by somebody who was working for me, which got my attention right away. And he basically told me his why. Person on the left told me everything they were doing. And I zoned out by the second paragraph because you just don't need that because you've got the resume that's coming up right after that. That's something that I harp on. Should I get the air check? You want to do that? No?
Yep.
The air check is another thing. If you're going to be applying for an on-air job, obviously you're going to have to put an air check together. And what I recommend highly is don't put together a best of. In other words, don't give me all your best breaks in an air check, because you know what happens when that happens. If you get the job, that as a program director is what I'm going to expect on a daily basis. And I've had that happen where I've hired this person and I heard them the first day on the air and I went, this does not sound like the person I heard on the air check. And this is back in the days when you couldn't listen online to just eavesdrop on their show. And I couldn't understand that. And I realized that I got a best of. I got all their best breaks. Just send them something representative of your work, okay? Something that they will hear that is basically your work and your representative work on a daily basis, what your daily show would sound like. Now, the other thing I would also recommend is, just like a hit song, make sure the first 30 seconds get their attention.
Mm-hmm.
Don't narrate. Don't need any narration. Don't say, "Hey, I don't need the resume on your audition tape. I just need you to go right into the show." And if it's something that's a 10-second intro into a song that you think will get my attention, do it. But that should be the first 30 seconds needs to be, and I don't know how many air checks I have turned off after 15 seconds because, oh, this is what I'm going to get. I'm going to get boring. So and it's very subjective, I have to admit that, but still it's something you have to be considering when you're putting that audition tape together. That's a very important piece. And the way you send it, obviously, is MP3. Make sure it's MP3. Please don't send me your website. I don't want to have to go searching for where you are, where your shows are. Just send me an MP3. That's the other part of it. I think you complicate it that way, and you have to understand that the program director you're sending the information to is probably working 3 jobs inside the building. So that's something you have to be considerate of. So that's another reason to put it together that way. Dave?
Yeah, I agree. Let's talk a little bit about the actual interview when you get it. I think I have great news for you guys. This is what we're doing right now is great news for college graduates. The ability to have to fly somebody in, have them drive 4 hours, wait in the lobby, maybe the guy or the man or woman who you're interviewing with has gotten busy or is dissuaded because they've had an issue with the radio station or something. If I was reaching out for interviews right now, the first thing I would say is I am passionate about your cluster. I'm passionate about the job. If you give me 10 or 15 minutes on a Zoom interview right now, I promise you I won't waste your time. And as I do that, I can do it right now. And I've been doing this a long time. I reach out to ad agencies all day long. 20% I know, 80% I don't. And that's exactly how I approach them. They're interviewing me as a member of the Virginia Association of Broadcasters. They're saying, do I want to give this guy 30 minutes? Do I want to give this guy 20 minutes and talk about radio and television? I say to them in the email, I say, I will stop our conversation after 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And if you feel like this is a waste of time, we'll end it. We'll be done right now. And you can help me. Now, nicely, usually, they don't say, I feel like this has been a waste of time, goodbye. But it gives them that freedom to feel like you're going to be prepared, you're going to give them an out, and you're really interested in what they are. So I think Zoom and Skype and the availability to somebody to get to know somebody in 10 or 15 or 20 minutes, as opposed to all the hoops you have to go through to do an in-person interview, is great news for college graduates as you go through. John, you agree?
Totally. But I would also say, even though it is on Zoom, make sure, at least from the neck up, you look good. Okay. I will give you an example of an in-person interview. I had an air check from a guy. I had an opening, sounded great, fantastic. It was like, this is who I want. And we set up an interview. He walked in wearing flip-flops, shorts, and a t-shirt. And when I saw that, and again, this is a bit old-fashioned, but to me, that shows a lack of respect for the job, lack of respect for the person you're talking to. Make sure if you overdress, that's fine, but don't underdress. Make sure you look professional. That's still a part of this thing, this part of this interview, part of the job. We want someone, if we're looking for someone who's going to be on air, in these days, as you're on air, you're not just on air, you're not just talking to a microphone. You're doing videos, you're doing Facebook Lives, you're doing all kinds of things that the audience will see you. So they want to see how you look, how you react, what everything, how your presentation is in person in that respect. So and again, I think that's a great advantage for Zoom too, because you get to do that and you get to prepare it. You get a little time with it.
Yeah, I concur. Let's talk a little bit about follow-up. Let's say you got the interview and it went pretty well, which is, I hope, good for everybody. I hope it goes well for every interview that you do. What do you do next, right? I mean, how do you do that? Do you send an email? Yeah, I guess you can. Everybody sends emails. I'm a huge fan of standing out, and I got two ideas for you. Handwritten thank you notes, folks, are still big, and they don't have to go on forever. Personalized stationery, something that gets their attention, that says, hey, thanks for the time. After talking to you, I'm even more engaged with the opportunity. I'm going to do some homework and get back to you. I think that's fantastic. I also, since they will now know you and be familiar with your email address and you won't feel like it's spam, I love the idea of a 30 or 60 or 90-second video that you can send to somebody that gets to know your personality style, that just says, I've had people send me stuff that says, click here, just click here. That's all it says, and I click. Now, I wouldn't do that initially because I wouldn't know them very well, and I'd be concerned that, what am I getting, a virus or something on my computer? But if you know the email address, click here and give them 60 seconds in front of a video screen that says, man, I tell you, I really enjoyed the time I learned about, if you did, and I want to take this to the next step. What could I do to put myself in an engaged, solid role for this position? I think those are really great follow-up opportunities for you. But you got to stand out. If you're going to do the thanks for your time, I hope I can be considered, it's not going to stand out or not, and you're not going to get that second look.
There's no question. I mean, I can't add on to that. That's basically when I'm interviewing somebody, that's another thing that stands out for me, because then this person respects the position, respects the job, cares about it. And that's what you want. You want, especially if it's an on-air personality, because the on-air personality has a lot to do with feeling for the audience, communicating with the audience on an emotional level. And when you see that, you feel like, okay, this is the type of person that will fit into my team. That's what you look at.
Yeah, I concur. So we got 15 minutes left. We're going to do this quick so we're not losing you guys. Let's talk about some takeaways, something that you guys can look at and say, well, there was a great 45 minutes, but let's really concentrate on the last 15. What are 5 things that you guys can do to look at and say, this is what I'm going to take away from this hour that I spent with Dave and John today. You got to stick with it. Persistence and assertiveness are absolute. You can't be a wallflower. You can't sit in the background. You can't be checking off a box to say, you know what, my parents or my friends or everybody's giving me a hassle. I'm going to apply for 4 jobs this week. You got to stay persistent, and you got to be super assertive because you got to stand out. As John said, John said, do your homework. Go ahead, John. Sorry.
Do your homework. Like I said earlier, know who's interviewing you. Know them. As Dave said, make sure you have. If you know something about them, it's always good to bring that up. But again, make sure that you know that the person's name at least, and their full name. That way you can conduct a conversation with them without any problem.
So this came from Radio Sales 101 for me 35, 40 years ago. Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm 100 years old. USP. You got to develop your unique selling proposition for yourself. You know, great media companies and great businesses have USPs for themselves. Why Apple? Why Google? Why Amazon? Why you? Why somebody else? Why would an employer look at you and say, you know what, you are the one that I've got to look at a second and third and fourth look at? If you can't give yourself a 60 or 90-second elevator pitch for yourself to say, this is why I'm uniquely qualified for this position, whether it's geographically, whether it's background, whether it's your passion for the format, whatever it turns out to be, you're never going to take that next step. So if you do anything after this webinar, take a few minutes and really think about what your USP is going to be as you begin to assimilate and go after jobs. You really got to find it.
Yeah, I wrote an article for the trades this past week called "What's Your Why." So, and there's a book by that's called "Find Your Why" that would be perfect for you to read, because what is your why? Why do you want to do what you want to do? Why do you want to do it? Why are you headed in that direction? Find your why. That's very important.
Yep. Well, we've talked about ad nauseum through this webinar, but find some leaders and mentors and never let go. And I never have for all my career, and I know John feels the same. Find people you can grip onto and ask questions to. And as we talked about, there's really no excuse for not being able to communicate with all the availability of communication devices these days. There's really no excuse to staying in touch. I mean, I've been doing this a long time, and I will take 3 or 4 minutes out every day or every other day and reach out to somebody who's been influential in my life and just let them know I'm thinking about them, or ask them a question that I haven't seen. And I'm fortunate now after a lot of years that I have people doing that for me, with me as well. And I just can't emphasize enough, and I know John feels the same, find some leaders and mentors within your world and grasp onto them and don't let go.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, I'll give you a perfect example of that. Dave knows what I'm talking about. I'm about to work a deal with a young fellow who I mentored when he was 17 years old, who is now a major market personality, who wants me to work with him, who wants me to coach him. And he stayed in touch with me over the years. Matter of fact, we wound up hiring him in Virginia Beach to do a show for us at one point, because that's where he was from. He wanted to come back home. So it's always good you stay in touch with people. Sometimes it will benefit you in ways that you never realized.
Well, this is it, guys. I mean, you got to find a way to stand out. It's a crowded marketplace out there. And as I mentioned, and John mentioned as well, not only do you have the challenge of trying to start your career in a challenged period of time, but you've also got a lot of broadcasters with 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years experience that have been displaced for one reason or another. You have to find your way to stand out through that interviewing process. And to me, and I think John would agree, that digital social media arm that you guys possess because it's second nature to you. I'm sure you all have strong broadcast abilities, if that's the arm you're looking for, or sales techniques that you're working on. I think those are all super valuable. But you have, I believe, not to be too stereotypical, but you've got that second nature to be able to explain what TikTok is to old guys like John and I, and to be able to really get us engaged in that, figure out your USP and figure out a way to stand out.
Yeah. How many of you remember flip phones? Probably nobody.
Jeez, John.
So you've grown up in the technological side of things where the smartphone has been with you since you were a child, and you have that advantage, and that's your wild card. So exploit that as much as possible. That's what I would do. No question.
Yep. So you guys were great enough, and I promise we're on the home stretch here. You guys were great enough to ask some questions of us, and John was nice enough to forward them to us. So we've covered some of this, but we wanted to address it. And then, John, if it's okay with you, we'll be happy to take anything else that jumps out at anybody's mind. Cover letter catches your attention. We mentioned it: font, space, look, passion, approach, something that is out of the norm. That to me is something that's always going to catch my attention more than the standard letter, for sure.
Should we include any keywords in our application? I don't know if keywords mean anything, but I think just be yourself. Show who you are in the application. And it's not necessarily an application. Your application is your resume and your cover letter. So you may fill out an application once you're hired, but in our business, they don't send you an application. You get it the day you're hired. So basically, your resume and cover letter would be your application for the job. So whatever words you think best describe you, I would use.
And I would just add in too, if you're worried about any employers in radio that I'm aware of using scanning software or anything that would to try to catch keywords to see if somebody gets into the second round, I'm not aware of anybody in radio or broadcasting that does that. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. Follow up on an application. Yeah, I mean, just as we've talked about, good, creative, solid, productive ways to stay in contact and separate yourself from the crowd are really key. John, you want to take number 4?
Yeah, if you get an interview, should you follow up with an email, phone call, etc.? Which is ironic because my daughter just sent me a text about this earlier. She hadn't heard from somebody in a week or two and wanted to know what she should do. So I just said, yeah, if you follow up with an email when you come up to that point, but also with the interview, follow up with a confirmation, confirm the interview. Just say, hey, is it confirmed for this date? Anything else you need? And an email is probably the best thing. You don't need to do a phone call. I mean, I would send an email, but that's just confirm the interview. Following the interview, if it's just like following up on an application or your resume and cover letter, I would do what Dave said. I mean, just stay in touch. That's all you can do.
How do you design a resume to highlight what you want to be seen? I'm a big fan of one-page resumes. I just am. And I have this debate with people all the time. People that have been in the business 20 years, somebody has sent me a resume recently, and it went on from, his background as being a dog catcher 25 years ago. I don't care. I just don't care. I care about what you've done in the last 5 or 10 years, and relevant experience, or in college graduation situations, relative needs. Highlight them, color, different, bold, something. If you want it to stand out, you got to figure out a way to make it stand out. And we've talked about different ways to do that artistically. I'm a huge fan of getting a design person to look at your resume. There's plenty of resume experts, I'm sure, on the campus that you're sitting on or involved with that can lay that out. But if you want something to catch somebody's eye fast, bold it, make it different color, make it something they can see.
All right, let's get to the next question here. Here we go. Oh, we got 2 of them. I'm sorry, I had 2 of them.
That's right. John, take number 6.
Preparing for interviews, we've told to ask questions ourselves. What type of questions you feel should be asked? Well, I would tell you this. First of all, make sure you know what the job is. If you're curious about the job, ask about it. Ask more about it. What's the job description like? What would a normal day will be like? What's your expectations of somebody like me? They may already have told you, but those are the things that you may not get answered. They may ask a lot of questions about where you came from, your experience, et cetera. But those are probably questions I would ask if I were in this situation. You want to know more about the job as much as possible, and ask about the company. Ask a little more about the company, opportunities for advancement, even to the point where, is there a 401k, things of that nature. Think of your future in all of this. But those are the normal questions you would ask in an interview. You would have to get to know more about the company. Yeah,
I agree. I thought number 7 was a really good question. I interpret it as saying, you want to feel like you're a good negotiator. You don't want to feel like you're a laydown, right? So if somebody gives you a job offer, when is the right time to say, is there more money? Or is there something else I can do? Or should you just be appreciative to get the job and move on smartly and do your thing? And I guess I hate to cop out on this, and I don't mean to, but it really does kind of depend on the environment. I do think it's okay when someone gives you an offer to say, is there anything else I could do within the building to create more revenue opportunities for me as an employee for you, as opposed to saying, getting more dough. If there isn't any more money, it's a very smart idea to say, I don't know if I'd necessarily jump on vacation right away, because that can be inferred as somebody that maybe is thinking about their first vacation within the first 6 months or a year. But there always are things that aren't costing general managers and companies money. Vacation normally doesn't. That's an opportunity. So I hate to say it kind of depends on the situation. I would say more often than not, asking a question like, how could I create more revenue for myself within the first year, by enforcing the fact that you're willing to take on more roles, not that you just want more money, I think could be valuable for you, if that makes sense.
And let's face it, the reality is this: you're going to be probably have some of your college mates, friends in school that are getting job offers for a lot more money than you're seeing in this business. But that's what happens. I mean, to get into the computer side of things with a technology company, they pay very well. But that's because that's where the money is at this point. In the radio business, radio stations, as we've talked about, are doing a lot more with less. So the piece of the pie is a lot smaller. So you have to look at it from that standpoint. Don't compare yourself. Don't compare what you're doing, your job, this profession, to another profession. Media is a very different ballgame. It's very, very different as far as the way it pays, but it does reward. It has its rewards for the longer you stay in it. Trust me on that.
Yeah, what are some things that interviewers have done in the process to get them the job? We talked about unique ways, unique selling propositions, unique things to do. I think you have to find the balance between being too cutesy, but also being assertive. Stay focused through the process of engaging the person that's doing the interviewing with you about their needs, their roles. It's so easy to get on a tangent about yourself and where you've come from and what you've done. I'd be cautious of that. Make sure that you're really focused on their needs, what they're looking for, and digging in of the process to make sure that you can accompany all those and get them really accomplished for yourself. Be assertive and be aggressive at times. Make sure they know that you're the person for this job.
Right. Be a good listener, more than anything too, in the sense that you may have your list of questions, but it's the same thing when I work with people, work with hosts, et cetera, about interviewing people. Listen to what the person says and take that from what they're talking about to your question, your next question. Make sure that it leads to something. Don't have a list of questions. Don't just bounce all over the place with questions that you might have. Listen to your interviewer and take it from there as far as whatever questions you might have.
John, why don't you take number 9?
Well, what can you expect when you start? It just depends on the job, but I think you can expect to be fully immersed. There's a somewhat of a training period in our business, but a lot of times you get thrown into it, and that's probably the best way to go. I will tell you, my first 3 days in the business, I slept for 2 hours because Tropical Storm Agnes hit the Philadelphia area, and the radio station I was on got it was a daytime radio station that got the permission from the FCC to be on 24/7, and I just went into the program director's office, said, whenever you need me, I'm here. He said, well, I could use you for the next 3 days. Okay. And I went home and ate, came back, took a nap, came back. That was basically it. So sometimes you get thrown into it. And I will tell you that getting thrown into it for those 3 days was a tremendous learning experience. So be ready to jump right in. That's the advice I would give you. Forget about a probation period. There really isn't anything like that. Once you start, you're in. Dave? No?
Yeah, I would agree. Totally agree with that. That's well said. All right, John, from CBI, in a remarkable turn of events, we have kept it within our 60-minute window, I think. I like that billboard. That's funny. People are doing such unique ways to get noticed.
Creative ways to ask for a job, huh?
Yeah, I like that. We enjoyed the time very much with you guys. I hope we covered some of the things that can be helpful for you. There's a bunch of pictures of current John Shomby and Dave Paulus. We were having fun in a lot of those pictures, John. I think, I don't know, some bands next to us or something. Thanks for the opportunity from my end, guys, in Virginia Beach. Sorry about my power failure, but I'm glad we got back up quickly.
Well, that looks great. One thought I had, and get your feedback. I have a student, several of them, who are applying for jobs, but one of them's applying for a job that's not close enough to the university that they could work at this point. Is it okay to apply now for a job that you won't be able to work until May after the semester ends? Or should these students be waiting a little bit later into March and April?
John, you want to take that?
I would say, and I've actually given my own daughter this advice: apply. Even if it doesn't work out, get the experience. Get yourself the interview experience. I would apply for anything you could apply for that somewhat interests you in this business. It also creates a part of your network that you can start to grow. That's another way to do it too. I think that's it's never too early to do that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with John more, John. You know, most of the people, program directors, certainly operations managers, directors of sales, and general managers, they have all done the job. So they've been announcers, they've been DJs, they've been salespeople, they've been sales managements. GMs in most cases come from the sales side of the building. They appreciate sales and techniques because they had to do it themselves in many cases. So I totally agree with John. I mean, look, if you're not going to graduate for a year and a half, that's probably early. But if you're a few months out and you want to ping somebody every month, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, I think it's a great idea.
Excellent. I also think too, if you're you know, like a sophomore or junior and you're that interested in the radio business and you want to, you know, apply for something part-time at a radio station that's nearby or within an hour away or an hour and a half away, I would highly suggest it. I have the fellow that I'm going to be working with now. That's what he did. This was his hometown station, but he was 18 years old and he just, you know, got started in school. So that's another way to get your experience. A lot of people get their experience that way, working part-time through college. Plus, it's if you can make a little, you know, little money, little spending money, that helps.
Yeah, I've often told my students when they ask should they apply, I just ask them, do you have the job right now? No. What's the worst that can happen when this is over? I still don't have the job, but who knows what the contacts are.
There it is.
There.
Perfect.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Over in the chat column, there are all sorts of thank yous. People really appreciating this. I know it's been incredibly helpful to the students. So thank you for joining us. And I hope some of you do follow through and make John and Dave your mentors, because they're serious about that. Have a great day and join us for the next time on CBI webinars.